Sensibly Speaking podcast. This is Chris Shelton, the critical thinker at large, coming at you for show number 126, brought to you on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and here with video on YouTube. This week, we're just going to get right into it here. This is a non-political episode this week, totally off from what we were covering last week with Trump and all that. And we're going to talk about humanism this week. And this is a subject that I have been fascinated, interested, and intrigued by for quite some time. I heard and read some work from some humanists and thought, you know, if there is any label that I would be happy, like unconditionally happy to have assigned to me, it would be a humanist. And I can only say that, of course, now that I've learned more about it and what it's all about. And I'm so happy and enthusiastic about it that I wanted to promote humanism and decided to take an episode of my podcast to do so. But instead of just talking myself about it, I invited the president of the American Humanist Association to speak about the topic. And her name is Rebecca Hale, and she actually lives here in Colorado, so she's just down the road from me, but we're not doing a live one, we're doing it by Skype. So thank you very much, Rebecca, for being on the show.
Thank you, Chris. I'm happy to be here with you.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's just jump right into this. You are the president of the American Humanist Association, so I figure if anybody could tell me about this, it would be you. So what, first off, is humanism, and how is it different or contrast with atheism, skepticism, secularism, all these other isms that we talk about in the secular community?
Okay, well, I can read you the official definition.
Sure.
But okay, so we'll do that, and then I'll really talk about what it is. Humanism is a progressive philosophy of life that, without theism and other supernatural beliefs, affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment, those lives that aspire to the greater good of humanity. So how it differs is that when someone says they're an atheist, they're only saying they don't believe in gods. That's really all they're saying about themselves, is they don't believe in gods. When they say they're a skeptic, they say they question everything. They don't really question everything.
No, they don't. There's all kinds of things they accept as well, but yes.
That's right. But when you say you're a humanist, you're saying more about how it is you choose to live your life. And you're saying more about how you choose to interact with other people. I live in Colorado Springs, which is sort of a libertarian bastion. And so when I discuss it with people, I tend to try to speak in terms that resonate with them. And that is that humanism is a life philosophy of personal responsibility. We don't expect a god or a deus ex machina to reach down from the heavens and save us. We figure people made the problems, people have to fix the problems. And so that's really the very, very root of it. We feel a responsibility to other sentient and non-sentient beings here on the planet, that science, and whether it's social science or the hard sciences, show that there are certain ways that you conduct yourself in life that make things work better. And there are other ways that are not so productive. And so we encourage the behaviors that have been shown to be more productive and more beneficial for everybody. And that's really the difference.
Okay, cool. And why is it that the definition that you gave, or what the description you just gave, doesn't seem by its nature to inherently disregard or call for a disbelief in a god or gods? It's
without supernatural.
So that is an inherent part of being a humanist then. You can't go to church on Sundays and also call yourself a humanist.
Well, some people can.
Okay.
And so as a representative of the American Humanist Association, our position is that it is non-theistic.
Okay.
And we don't rely on anything supernatural. But certainly there are many components of humanism that any religious person could have. The part that differentiates American Humanist Association, our version of humanism, from that which is practiced by, I don't know, a Catholic or an Episcopalian or a Muslim or anybody, is our acceptance that there is no supernatural mechanism.
Okay. Okay.
There are things certainly that we haven't all figured out yet, that science hasn't worked out exactly how something works, but that doesn't mean it's supernatural.
Oh, absolutely. And I only ask because I know that there are some theists, right? Some believers who are going to think, well, I have those values. You know, I don't necessarily, I might believe in a God figure or an afterlife of some kind, but I definitely don't think that he's going to come down and interfere with my life or anybody else's life. It's on us to deal with the problems that humans create.
Yeah,
so I just wanted to clarify that.
We have a certain, a few percentage points of our membership who are deists. You know, people have a difficult time accepting that all of this is natural and it just was an upswell of some stardust and some high pressure and some water and some gases and all the chemistry involved in making life. And they like the sense, or they're more comfortable with the sense of something getting it going. So certainly we have some membership that are deists. It's certainly not where I come down. I'm an atheist, but it's not so important to me whether somebody believes in a supreme being or not. What's important to me is how they choose to conduct their life and how they make decisions on how to live. In other words, do they make decisions because some authoritarian religious figure told them it was the way it was supposed to be? Or do they make decisions because they read it in a book that supposedly was written by the hand of God, or the whisper of God into some human's mind? Or whether they make the decisions based on rational thinking, scientific research, some personal experience, and empathy and kindness.
Excellent. Well, I will definitely come down on not that side of things in terms of how I go about making decisions. But I'm definitely an I don't knowist when it comes to the God question, right? So I just got to go, well, I don't believe in it, but I don't know. I can't say for sure. But I wanted to beat that point a little bit.
Either way.
I'm sorry?
We can't prove it either way.
Exactly.
I mean, we can't prove it exists. We can't prove a negative. We can't prove God doesn't exist.
Right.
So God is irrelevant.
That's where, in this question, I completely agree with you. And that's why I, like I said, proudly call myself a humanist without compunction, because I'm not a believer, but I have this sort of, well, I don't really know. And I think that's a pretty important distinction versus some atheists who are quite militant about their no, there isn't, and God damn it, you shouldn't think so either, sort of thing, Right. Okay, fair enough. Now, how many are there anyway? How many humanists are there in the AHA or in the United States?
Well, we have about 34,000 members and supporters.
Excellent.
Those are people who have taken the step to, give us some money this year. There are many more people who are members of their local chapters or, floating around on university campuses and high schools and community centers that haven't chosen to send us money and declare themselves members. There's a lot more humanists that I run into. Oh, I'm a humanist, but we can't count them because they haven't given us any money.
Oh, I see. Okay, good. Well, as far as the actual membership goes, that's encouraging. Because I think this is probably a group that is going to grow as it is promoted more often and more frequently, you know?
I think so, definitely. And I think, I understand you've had some programs on politics, and I confess to have been too busy and I haven't listened to them, so I don't know where you are in the political spectrum. But I would lay odds that Bernie Sanders is a humanist.
Yes, I think that's exactly right.
But he's not a member of our organization, so we can't count him.
Right, exactly.
There. Yeah.
I can't help but call up this old Scientology. As you know, I used to be involved in church Scientology, and there was this saying in Scientology, because it's kind of funny. You have about as many paying members in the AHA as there are Scientologists around the world. Yeah, now Scientology is international, so that's around the world. We're just talking about America when we're talking about, 34,000 members. But the thing that I'm laughing about inside right now is I'm thinking to myself, well, everybody's a humanist. They just don't know it yet. And this is something we used to tell ourselves when I was in Scientology. Well, everybody's a Scientologist. They just don't know it yet. So I hope that's not wishful thinking on my part. But I think I have a better basis for comparison and for saying something like that, because I think there are a lot of people out there who share the values we've been talking about already in this episode. How did you personally become a humanist? What was your path to this, and to discovering about it, becoming interested enough about it to want to be part of it, and then actually becoming the head of the organization?
That's not a very exciting story. I live in awe of the people who have made a journey from a hereditary religion where they believed in some supernatural being. I was raised this way. So I'm a little bit unusual. Most of our members did come from some other religion. But when I was raised as a humanist, it was when there wasn't really a lot of difference between a Unitarian and a humanist. And my parents, my father came from Judaism, my mother came from Church of the Brethren, and they had both left their religions and they had discovered Unitarianism. So I was raised within the Unitarian movement. So I sort of have a different perspective, because since I was raised this way and I was raised a Unitarian, and then the Unitarians started taking this strange little march over towards more traditional religions and more mythological belief systems, I held my ground and was fortunate to have the American Humanist Association find me. Colorado Springs in I guess it was the mid-90s, had started to get very conservative. We were no longer, we'd stopped teaching evolution in a number of our high schools. They were teaching creation science.
It's that bad in Colorado Springs that they're actually teaching evolution and got rid of evolution and are teaching creationism in the school? I did not realize that.
This was back in the 90s.
Yeah.
And yes, in the school districts, this was happening.
Wow. No wonder they say what they say about Colorado Springs.
Yeah, well, we're getting better. We're getting a lot better. But anyway, I was working, I guess by that time, my husband, Gary, was working with the youth group at the Unitarian Church. I had done my 3 or 4 years with them, and then he was working with them. And we had an amendment pass that was taking the civil liberties away from gays and lesbians. If you're from Colorado, we passed a whole amendment in the state. You could not rent to people, you could not hire them, you could kick them out of their apartments or their homes.
Jesus. This was in the mid-90s?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's called Amendment 11. and it was pretty bad. So he was working with a high school group at the Unitarian Church at the time, and one of the gals, one of the young ladies came in, and she was very upset. She was on the swim team at one of the more northern high schools, and they were always praying before they would come out and swim, or they would come out and pray and then they would swim. And she asked the coach if it would be okay if she waited until after they prayed to come out. And he said yes, and he put her on the bench, and he didn't put her in the water anymore because she wasn't a team player. So we had this going on, and then we had the passage of the amendment that was taking the rights of gays and lesbians away from them. And Gary and I are sort of activist type people, and we looked at each other and we said, we got to do something about this. And we started a little mail order business called Evolve Fish. And we started off selling the little Darwin fish car plaques. And then we had one designed for us that was an Evolve Fish. And that was sort of our hobby for the first year or so, is we advertise it in the little local independent newspapers. And we'd go to this was before the internet, and we would go to the post office and pick up our 5 or 6 orders for the week, and we would go home, and we were so excited we were sending these things out. And one thing led to another, and at one point we went to the church, and there was a fellow there with a big bookstore that he had kind of carried around the back of his pickup truck. His name was Lou Dunlap. And Lou ran the bookstore for the American Humanist Association. And he was getting on in years, and it was kind of difficult for him to haul these bookcases and these books all over the country all the time. And he asked us if we would buy his bookstore. So we bought his bookstore, and we started going to the American Humanist Association conferences. And that's really how I got introduced to humanism as an official organization.
I see. Okay. So this guy was a one-man band driving around the country with a truck full of books, selling them, and these were books about humanism, I guess.
Yeah, and he had a wife, and she helped him, so he wasn't quite a one-man band.
Oh, two-man band. Yeah, two-person band.
He was associated with the American Humanist Association. It was a national organization. It was pretty small in those days. When I first went on to the board of the AHA, I think we had about 6,500 members. And so...
And when was that? How long ago was that?
People always ask me how long...
those many years ago.
Yeah. I'm thinking it was around, about 2006.
Okay, about 11 years ago.
Yeah, about that. 2005, 2006.
Okay.
On the board of directors, yeah.
And it's seen an expansion of about 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad.
We just moved into a great new building in Washington, D.C. We had this old building that everybody was sitting on each other's shoulders. Our staff was really shoehorned in there. And in the last year, we bought a new building, and we have room to breathe now. So I think we'll be set for a couple of years.
Awesome. Well, that's really good, and I'm really happy to hear about the expansion. In expanding and going out into new areas and talking to more people and setting up more chapters and that sort of thing, what do you think is like the oddest or weirdest thing anyone out there has said about humanists? Like, have you run into any kind of weird opposition of any kind?
Well, there's always weird opposition, but I don't think it's any different than the opposition the atheists run into. People think they sacrifice babies. We're a secular humanist for a long time. Calling somebody a secular humanist was a slur. It was a terrible thing to be called. And because it meant you had no values. I've had so many people say to me, well, how do you know how to be good? How do you
Mm.
do what's right? And it's been an interesting, journey to think that these people are asking me this, but these are the same people that will honor people who do terrible things to each other, support the behavior of Catholic priests and other white collar clerical people who do terrible things to children. So it's one of those things is you look to see what they're accusing you of doing, and you kind of have an inkling that that's what they're doing.
Right, right. And just to be clear about that, that's not to paint, everyone who practices Catholicism with a brush of, of complacency or you guys are all okay with pedophilia or something, but just to also be, but to be even more crystal clear, there are people who are practicing Catholics who are giving the church a pass on their behavior.
And it's not just Catholicism.
Right.
And I suspect, I mean, I don't have any evidence, I don't have any particular instances, but I'm sure there's a humanist or two out there who's also doing things that we wouldn't necessarily approve of.
Absolutely. There's no, just percentages wise, there's no way that there isn't.
Yeah. But the hypocrisy that goes on in organized religion is something that is pretty blatant.
It certainly can be, and it certainly is disturbing when it rears its ugly head. And we do see instances of that in comment sections on social media of all kinds, all platforms, in talking head pundits making excuses for the Pope or for cardinals or bishops or whatever. I mean, we see this activity. It's not you really don't have to look very hard or very far to find this kind of complacency, and that's the target, not all Catholics or something like that. And I just wanted to take a moment to make that clear, not because I think you're saying that, but just because the audience hears things differently sometimes.
Yeah, no, I have a brother-in-law who's a dear man, and he's the best Catholic,
Yeah.
Wednesday nights, Saturday night, Sunday morning, he's doing his thing.
Exactly. I have good friends who are good Catholics, and I value their friendship, but they're not complacent about, pedophilia, but they know people who are,
Right.
Okay, well, let's now, since we've sort of really, popped into the whole church thing, does the AHA, does the American Humanist Association get it all involved in the separation of church and state issues? This is FFR, Freedom from Religion Foundation, or FFRF territory. I mean, I was impressed the other day. I even saw an FFRF TV commercial on MSNBC. I didn't know they were making commercials. That was pretty cool. But does the AHA ally with them, work with them in any way, or is that a completely separate thing from what the humanists are doing?
We work with them. We have our own legal center. We have the Apignani Humanist Legal Center. We have 2 or 3 on-staff attorneys. They're very active. We have close to a 90%, better than a 90% win rate, and compliance rate with our letter writing. So we do most of the same things Freedom from Religion does.
Oh.
And quite honestly, we're more careful about the cases we take because we don't want to set bad precedent. But our attorneys are gung-ho, brilliant. They've argued cases in front of the Supreme Court. And we win.
So
the other thing that we do that is we have started a campaign. It's been going for several years now about the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh.
Where we encourage high school and college age students, well, college they don't have to do it so much, but high school and middle school, to stand for your rights, sit for the pledge. Because in many states they've made the pledge mandatory, which is unconstitutional.
Right.
Students don't know that. So we've had students all over the country who will sit down and not stand and rise for the pledge because it's a bit of a prayer, among other things. And
one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sure.
Right, and that wasn't originally in the pledge.
Right.
That under part. And so these kids sit, and if they get into any kind of difficulties with their school districts or their teachers as a result of that, we come to their defense.
Nice.
And we handle those lawsuits. Currently, we're waiting for a ruling on a lawsuit in Douglas County, Colorado. There was it's called a Christmas Child program, and they encourage, this is elementary school, I think, they encourage the kids to bring in little, pencils and school supplies and stuff like that to go into a little shoebox that then gets sent overseas to Muslim kids to help them. It seems like this very benign, nice thing. You want to help them. You want to have them have school books and pencils and all this kind of thing. But then also what goes in the box are religious tracts talking about Christianity and all the proselytizing that goes on.
Well, it seems like there would be no better way to make sure that help would not be well received at the other end.
Yes.
Except, to stick, I mean, how would they feel if they got similar boxes from Iraq with a bunch of Muslim tracts in it? I mean, do they even ask themselves a question like that when they do stuff like this?
Of course not, because they're saving these souls, you see. It's their mission. The point is they're using public school, they're using government money, government resources, and the public schools to fill these boxes.
Right.
So that's one lawsuit we're waiting for the verdict on right now.
It's just so stupid because it's such a fantastic waste of time and energy on the part of well-intentioned children who are going out of their way to try to help somebody on the other side of the world out of probably a pure desire to be of humanist assistance, and then it gets like messed up and in such a way as to guarantee that help is not going to be perceived as help. What a waste! What a stupid waste.
Yeah, so it's a good thought, but they didn't execute it very well.
No, and there are ways they could execute that while still getting their name in there as a Christian organization and try to build some bridges. But when they just beat people over the head with those religious tracts, it just wastes the whole thing. I got curious about something you said there. You said you guys were a bit more careful about the cases you take on than the FFRF has been, or in terms of that. What's your decision point? What were you looking at there when you said that?
Well, one thing that we do is we're kind of following the track that a lot of the LGBTQ groups did. And we're not bringing cases that are going to go in front of courts where we might lose and set a bad precedent. So right now we're staying, I think it's the district court areas, so they don't get bumped to the federal Supreme Court.
Okay.
Because we don't feel like we can prevail in the Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court rules against us, then you've set precedent that goes on for decades. That's something that we very much are wanting to avoid.
I see. I don't know anything about this sort of thing, but is it a thing where you would work at a local level and build up case law in a certain direction, or with your successes? Is that a long-term strategic thing, or is that just how you're dealing with the cases you're taking on?
No, it's a strategic thing, and I am not an expert on the court system. So I know that there are some courts that if you try a case in front of that court and you don't get the ruling you want, you can appeal to the next higher court.
Right.
And what we don't want to do is get into that line of court jumping where we end up in front of a court that will rule against us.
Yeah, I get it.
We also stick to cases that we feel we have a pretty good assurance of winning.
And that's nothing particularly unusual for groups taking on court cases. I mean, who wants to take on losing cases just just cause, you know.
Some people will do that because because it does afford a certain amount of publicity.
Right.
You know, whether you win or you lose, you get publicity and you get your message out there. So there's some value to it. I'm not saying there's no use in doing it, but at this point in time in our court systems, it's not as the backside of a loss can be very damaging into the future.
Okay, I get it. I'm tracking on that. Okay, interesting. Other than the you know, maybe religious right or extreme, you know, people who come from a black and white thinking perspective of, you know, if you're not accepting Christ into your heart and you're not, you know, a Jesus lover or God lover or something, then you're evil and you must be destroyed. I mean, we know those exist, and that's what I consider the lunatic fringe of the religious spectrum, because I know not, you know, most believers are not that far gone.
Right.
Is there any other groups or things or individuals or anybody that you've run into out there who hate on humanists or who are actively opposed to what you guys are doing?
I don't think so. Most people don't know what it is. One of the arguments I frequently have with David Silverman of American Atheist.
Yes, I've had him on the show.
He's
a firebrand.
He gets around. He is a firebrand, and I like David. I really do like him, and
Yep.
I think there's absolutely a purpose and a role for what he does.
I agree.
He makes a lot of noise, and again, it's one of those situations where you're out there and you're making a lot of publicity, and so more people get to hear the message.
That's right.
So there's very much a good piece of that. The part where I get into conflict with David is he said we should all only use the word humanist. We should not use the word, we should only use the word atheist. We should not use the word humanist. And that's one of David's favorite speeches, where he really gets all excited and says, you're wasting your time. Humanist is a wishy-washy word and you shouldn't use it. We should all use atheist. And so I would say that maybe that's one other place where I disagree with him.
Right. Getting a little bit of hate from David, from the atheists. That's hilarious. But of course, it totally makes sense to me because David is the president of the American Atheist Association. So, of course, he's going to want to promote atheism as much as he can. That's our David. Okay. Now, in terms of where all this is going, I mean, obviously, the struggle right now is what you just said, getting yourself known. You know, it's mainly a non-existence, a point that you don't exist in people's minds. I mean, they don't even know what humanism is, what it stands for, that it's a thing.
It's harder to define.
Okay, fair enough. So how do you see the organization moving forward, or humanists out there moving forward into the future to remedy that situation and grow the organization? What are the plans and programs with that?
Well, we have a lot, really. My personal thing, one thing that we did when David was president, we began doing it, and that was advertising. Now, we don't have the same level of resources as FFRF, so we can't run these very expensive television commercials, which I think are valuable, and I think they're a good thing. I believe in marketing. I believe in advertising.
Yeah, me too.
One of the things I would like to see is when our membership is going to work at the soup kitchen, or our membership is working on a highway, or volunteering in a literacy center, or at a homeless shelter, or even on a political campaign, I'd like to see them wearing a t-shirt or a hat or a pin that says "Proud Humanist," or "I'm a humanist, ask me what that is," or anything, because I think that's the way, outside of marketing and advertising, and we have a very large Facebook presence. I think we are we're the biggest in Facebook.
Well,
But
that's how I first
so,
heard of you guys. Was I actually ran across an article that David Nyos had posted and reached out to him and had him on the show also. And that was how I first heard of him was through his some article he'd posted that I was very impressed by.
right.
So Facebook is definitely a way to get the word out there.
Yeah. So I don't remember our membership on Facebook, but it's big and we get a lot of media hits. But really the thing that, that'll encourage somebody to take a look. But what really gets somebody moving in that direction is if they personally know someone. And as we walk through our days doing whatever it is we do, people don't necessarily say, "Oh, what religion are you?" Or "What is your life philosophy?"
That's right.
Or
No,
anything
people
like
tend to avoid those questions these days because there's such divisiveness out there, and it's a shame because we really should be more open to being curious about what other people are up to without fear of having to turn it into a fisticuffs, or some kind of tumble in the mud because you simply disagree about something. It's a real shame.
Yeah, so I think that's where I would like to see us be more visible.
Excellent.
We have celebrants of over 360 celebrants now who are really a very good outreach for us. They do weddings and coming of age ceremonies and memorial services. We have one in Texas who is doing services at one of the Air Force bases. I think she's at Lackland Air Force Base, and she'll do a Sunday service, if that's what you want to call it, with well over 1,000 people. Now, when you're hitting those numbers, there's an interest out there, and it's just a matter of helping people know how to get involved and be more aware of it. I think the difficulty is that most humanists who aren't active members of the organization are simply out there living their lives.
Of course.
They're out there being good people.
Right.
They're coaching the soccer team or their kids' little league team or whatever, and they're not feeling that need to go beat on other people to prove that they don't have to believe in God to be a good person. They're just doing it. They're just walking the walk, walking the talk. And so a little bit more visibility by those people, I think, would be very helpful.
Agreed. You walkers and talkers out there, listen up. We need your help. Get active.
I'm going to get you a humanist lapel pin.
That's right. That's right. All right. Fair enough. Well, is there any other aspect to where you think the group is going, or anything else that you think we might want to talk about that I haven't had a chance to ask you about with this thing?
Well, we're working along with MAF, which is the Military Association of Atheists and Freethinkers, to get humanist celebrants within the military. When you, and of course, military are of interest to me because Colorado Springs, we have a lot of military bases here.
Yep.
That as the younger demographic moves into the military, you're going to get more and more non-theistic individuals in there. I think they're saying the under 22 age group is something like 30% non-theistic.
Wow.
But when you get into those kinds of numbers, they deserve the opportunity to have representation within the chaplaincy. And so right now, the military has not approved humanist chaplains. They're fighting that battle. Most of the chaplains you'll find will be Protestant, some Catholics, a couple of Jewish, maybe a Muslim. And so what we want, that's one of the big campaigns that we're working with MAF with, is to get humanist chaplains into the military in the United States.
And would those people serve as like a counseling function?
Well, see, you hit the nail on the head there, because what happens is when you're in the military, if you go to see an official counselor or psychologist because you're having a rough time in your life, whether you're coming back with PTSD or you have trouble at home, just because humans sometimes have trouble interacting, if you go to a psychological professional, that goes on your record, goes in your military jacket. If you go to see your priest or your clergy or your chaplain, that's private. That does not go into your military record. So what we're seeing right now is an inability of our non-theistic military members to find someone that they can talk to about these very personal issues without it turning up in their military records.
Interesting. Because I guess that could be somehow construed as it shouldn't be, but I would rebel against the whole idea of it being considered a black mark on your record if you went to get some counseling. But it does kind of come across that way in the military?
Sure it does, yes.
Okay, wow. All right,
that's a weakness. That's a weakness. You're not the
G.I. Joe doesn't need to go talk about his daddy issues, right?
Right, exactly.
Wow. All right, yeah, stigma. Okay, no surprise there. And I see that as a necessary step then, in that.
Yeah, and you can make the argument that there shouldn't be any chaplains in the military at all, but I think that's very unrealistic. In the situations that we put our military in, people, they need someone to talk to.
For sure.
And so if we're going to accept the premise that sometimes those people are going to be representations of a religious group, then the non-theistic people, the non-theistic military members also need that same kind of individual to speak with.
Right, exactly. And I personally would never want to dissolve the chaplaincy or whatever the word, the chaplain corps, whatever it's called, because I think that would be cruel. I think people who have belief should have somebody to fall back on in a stressful, traumatic situation like a battlefield war type combat situation. And so of course I would agree completely with a humanist approach there as well.
Right. I mean, we have humanists in the military.
Of course, exactly. Interesting. All right, cool. Well, listen, this has been very interesting. I would, where would people go right now if they were interested in finding out more about the AHA, humanism in general? Where do we send them?
AmericanHumanist.org.
Okay. And what will they find there?
Oh, they'll find a really big website. Okay,
good.
So, there are pages and pages. They can spend a lot of time there. If they're little children, we have kidswithoutgod.com. And there's, once you get into the website, there are links that will take you, and you can learn. The Humanist Society is where our celebrants are. You can find a celebrant nearby. It's all geographically listed if you want it to be. We're just started within our celebrant program into the prisons. So we've got some celebrants, actually a fellow who is a prisoner, and he's never getting out, but he wants that ability to help his fellow inmates and to hold meetings within the prison system. So we're getting into the prisons, but that again, you can find all of that by starting off at AmericanHumanist.org. If you're in Washington, D.C., you can come to the office.
That's right, in your beautiful new building.
Hey, I'm telling you, it is bright blue. It's AHA blue, and it has a happy humanist painted in white on the outside of the building. We're in a historic district, so they wouldn't let us put a sign up. but they would let us paint our building. So
Wow.
it's quite a
Okay,
sight to
but it is not, and I'm just going to take, because my audience is just going to like kill me if I don't mention this. It is not blue because L. Ron Hubbard said to make it blue, like he did the blue buildings in L.A. That it has
no.
no connection whatsoever. It just so happens that blue really does stand out, and you see a blue building right away. So,
And it's our color. We use this blue. I didn't realize it was a Scientology color.
only for the buildings in the heart of Hollywood, the Cedars of Lebanon complex. When Hubbard purchased that property in the mid 70s, he said, "I want it all painted a really livid blue," and it just stands out. I mean, you can see it for miles, you know. So I'd just be remiss if I didn't mention that. But clearly, no connection whatsoever here between humanists and Scientologists.
No, we are not Scientologists.
No, not at all. Not at all. All right. Well, Rebecca, thank you again very much for being on the show here. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I had a great time.
Awesome. All right, folks, if you have any questions, comments, criticisms, good, bad, sideways, leave them in the comment section below here on YouTube or at sensiblyspeaking.com. I am interested in your feedback on this. And if you have anything to say about humanism or some of the stuff we've talked about here, I look forward to that feedback. I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.